wait for the cue from the chat room to let us know that we are live, and ready to go. We're here. We're ready for a show. Are you ready? Are you ready to rumble? With some science and some supercomputers. Okay, we are
that's
live.
exactly what I was talking about. I just knocked the microphone over.
Yeah, we can still hear it, Blair.
I know, it's just less.
Your theory is incorrect.
You can hear it less.
All right.
No, we can hear it more. We can't hear you typing anymore. That's the only thing that's changed.
All right. We are ready to go. Starting the show in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 747, recorded on Wednesday, November 13th, 2019. What makes a computer super? Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Kiki, and today we will fill your head with crafty computers, smart apes, and bat guts. But first...
Disclaimer. From the first electronic digital computer ever created, we imagined possibilities beyond our imagination. Now, imagining anything beyond your imagination isn't an easy thing to do. The limits of imagination being left up to the imagination as they are, people can imagine some pretty amazing things. The thing about computers that captured our imagination and then released us from our previous imagining limitations was that for the first time in humanity, we found a technology that held the potential to do something we never thought a technology could ever do for us. Think. And while the potential for a thinking computer was little more than wishful thinking when the first computers were built, we have been building on that idea, pouring generations of thought into making it a reality until today, when at long last, the dream of a thinking computer has arrived. And, well, some will argue that computers can't actually think even now. Others will argue that that sort of thinking is just overthinking what thinking actually is. And still others will remain convinced that no matter how advanced a computer may become, no matter how many or how fast the processing power becomes, even if they can form personalities and act out opinions, they will never replace This Week in Science. Coming up next.
Oh. Music fail.
Cue the music. Stake up the band.
That's
Do we forget to hire a DJ for the party?
Shh.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening this week in science? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again to talk about all the science that we love. And once again, there are so many stories. We had to cut through the chaff to get the best ones for this week. That's right. But as we're getting started, okay, I just for one moment need all of you to say Copernicium on the count of 3, okay? On the count of 3, we're going to say Copernicium, okay? 1, 2, 3. Copernicium!
Were we supposed to sing it? I don't know.
You could have sung Copernicium. That's right. So we are going to be part of the remaking of the Elements song by the Royal Society's Chemistry World podcast and their collaborators. And we'll put a link in the show notes to the project description for anyone who's interested in what is actually going on. But you know, the Elements song where they sing about all the different... the Rodgers and Hammerstein
I don't know,
kind of...
obviously I don't know the elements for nothing. Otherwise
Yes, they're remaking it. And so I picked Copernicium, and that's what we're going to be. We will be in the song. Maybe. We'll see. But we've done it. We recorded it. It's good.
Oh, I think we can do better. Yes.
We can try it again later, but that was a pretty good start. On this week's show, we have science news. I brought stories about AI for freedom. Molecules that resemble DNA are entirely unlike, but kind of like DNA. They're not really DNA. We'll talk about that later. We also have an interview with supercomputer expert Dr. Steve Scott, and that's going to be coming up in just a few moments. Justin, what do you have for us?
I've got hitting pause on weather patterns, really smart apes, and greenhouse gases getting big in Japan.
Big in Japan. All right, let's talk about that. And Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have bat guts and I have some cuddly killer whales. And then just for fun, I brought a story about teeth. Those teeth in ancient times walk upon England mountain.
Just in case anybody stops listening.
Yeah.
Just in case anybody stops listening right now, don't cuddle orcas.
No, they're cuddling each
just
other.
A teaser
we'll
for
talk
a story.
about it later.
Don't go.
As we jump into the show, I would love to remind you that if you are not yet subscribed to the This Week in Science podcast, you can find us all places that podcasts are found. Seriously, we're just about everywhere. You can also find us on YouTube and on Facebook. You can find information about our show and show notes at twis.org, TWIS.org. That's also where you can find information about our 2020 TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar, which is available for pre-order now. But now it is time for our interview, and I would love to introduce our guest now. Dr. Steve Scott is CTO, HPC and AI of Cray, Inc., a Hewlett Packard Enterprise Company. He's been responsible for high-performance computing, storage, and data analytics, and was chief architect of several generations of systems and interconnects at Cray. Dr. Scott has also served as principal engineer in the platforms group at Google. Before that, at NVIDIA's Tesla business unit, Dr. Scott earned his PhD in computer architecture and BSEE in computer engineering. Dr. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kiki, thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you join us. As I was telling you before the show, I got a notice about something called Exascale Day a couple of weeks back, and I found myself wondering what exascale meant and what was going on, and so I reached out to see if we could have a conversation. So, first off, we're going to go there. We're going to find out what exascale really means. We're going to talk about supercomputers. How did you get involved in the supercomputer field, just to begin with?
Oh, boy. I went to school, studied computer architecture, got a job at Cray, and Cray is the supercomputer company, right? So Cray's been really, Seymour Cray, who founded Cray back in 1972, is widely considered the father of supercomputing, really defined the whole genre. And, Cray has been kind of the institution in high-end computing, supercomputing for, 40, 50 years now. So started right out of school. In fact, I was an intern here for a couple of years and loved it and been here ever since.
The quick definition on what makes a supercomputer, though, because 50 years ago, a supercomputer couldn't have been that super compared to like an average iPhone today.
Right. So we are all carrying around in our pockets computers that are much more powerful than the first supercomputer that Cray built back in the 70s. So so it's a moving target, right? A supercomputer is just whatever there's no definition, right? It's just like, it when you see it. It's the biggest, baddest, most powerful computers around. There's no strict definition of what's a supercomputer, but it's basically just the most powerful computers that are used for the most leading edge stuff. Today, a supercomputer will be the largest ones are the size of a basketball court or two. I mean, they're huge. Think thousands, tens of thousands of computers all networked together solving one big problem. And, you can spend anywhere from, at Cray, anywhere from maybe a few 100,000 up to a few 100 million your computer, depending upon how much cash you've got and what kind of problems you want to solve.
So if I spent some time collecting everybody's cast off computers and decided I was just going to network them all together, I could build myself a supercomputer in my basement.
Yeah, probably not a very good one, but yeah, you could do that.
But
I'm just wondering if there is something about like the actual architecture that goes into the circuits in the super. I mean, I've got, a Windows-based PC, that tower that's sitting here that my husband helped build, and we've got some really good processors in it. But how is what I have different from what goes into the supercomputers that you build?
Yeah, so fundamentally, if you just bought a bunch of PCs, went out to Best Buy, collected a bunch of PCs, got them from your friends, hooked them all up to an Ethernet network, and downloaded some software off the internet, you could kind of run parallel jobs on that and call it sort of a supercomputer. It'd be most of us would call it a cluster. Really, it's just, supercomputers today are kind of similar to that. We used to build custom design processors. The original Cray supercomputers were a single processor spread over 3,800 different circuit boards, built out of little, ECL-based chips that had just a few gates on them, and they were very bespoke, custom designed things. Now, Cray doesn't even build our own processors, so we use the same sort of processors that you'd have in a PC. Server versions of those, so they're faster. They've got maybe more memory channels and more cores on them and such. So it's think about something that might cost you $1,000 to buy the processor. The fastest supercomputers today typically will have GPUs in them as well. So the things that were originally designed to do graphics, but now people are doing regular computing on those. And so you'll maybe have some CPUs and GPUs tightly connected. And then you've got to put the right interconnect on the machine. So you're taking, in the largest machine, tens of thousands of these nodes, each of which will have some CPUs and GPUs, and tying them together with a custom designed interconnect that allows them to communicate at very high rates and with very low latency and synchronize. And then there's a whole bunch of specialized software that runs on top of it that takes all these tens of thousands of processors and makes them work in concert on one big problem, solving it together. So it's a matter of the adding up all the processors, really good network, lots of memory bandwidth, a very strong I/O subsystem to move data into the system. So it's all commodity technology, but put together in a way with a lot of specialized software on top that makes it work as one system.
Where are we currently in the power for processing?
So do you mean power as in thermal power, or do you mean power as in performance power?
Great question for my question. I meant performance power. So in terms of how many computations or processes per second?
Yeah, so the fastest machines right now are doing about 100 petaflops. So first of all, what is a flop? A flop stands for floating point operation. So floating point means it's a fractional number, not an integer, and an operation is basically an add or a multiply. So think about a 15-digit number, 3.468 blah 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 times 10 to the 12th, and then multiplying it by another 15-digit number. That's one flop or floating point operation. So 100 petaflops is 10 to the 17, a 1 followed by 17. That's 100 million billion, that many operations every second. So that's kind of where we're at today. And the next big frontier is an exaflop. So when people talk about exascale computing, they're really talking about being able to do a billion or 10 to the 18, a quintillion operations every second.
You made Blair's face go funny.
What happened to your face, Blair? Come back. But is there at any point a challenge of finding anything that requires that kind of processing power in real time, or do we have plenty that have been pushing those limits for a while?
There are so many problems. I mean, back when we were when I started in my field, we hadn't yet reached a teraflop, right? So that's a trillion operations per second. Hadn't gotten there yet. We've gone about, since I started at Cray, about 2.5 million times faster. But all along there were the problems that people wanted to solve that were just out of reach of the current computers. So every single area of science now, whether it's biology or chemistry or physics or earth science or cosmology, every single area has problems that they want to solve that the current computers aren't fast enough to solve.
That's what they're
computers
saying.
become the universal scientific instrument. You think about building a high energy super collider or something, and it's an incredible piece of instrumentation, but it does one thing: it smashes particles together and sees what happens. You can't use that to study biology or to look for predict the weather or anything else. But a computer can be used for literally every area of science, and there will not once we get to an exaflop, people start talking about the first zettaflop computer, which is 10 to the 21 operations, and it'll never stop.
There's the old idea that you need a computer the size of the universe to be able to simulate the universe. But at what point do you think that we'll be able to get to the number of processes that would give us some more realistic simulations than what we're looking at right now?
Yeah, I don't know where that end's going to be, but I guarantee you that we make them 100 times, 1,000 times faster. There'll be new problems that people want to solve. Obviously there are a few things that are kind of really interesting problems. Like there are things defined for an exascale that we really want to do. So we want to build a global weather model with a 1 kilometer grid, which is small enough to resolve ocean eddies and clouds and things like that spans the entire globe and do an accurate weather model. That's kind of an exascale problem. And so that's, there's some neat, tidy hurdles, if you will, that getting to each new level of performance will allow you to do. But there'll be new ones after that. Obviously, a lot of people think about artificial general intelligence, which is kind of a squishy concept. But and we're a long way away from that. But if computers keep getting exponentially faster, I think we'll get there.
Are you? How are you think? So this is physical, normal, standard computing. But then Google came out a week or two ago saying that they had reached quantum supremacy, and everybody's like, oh, quantum computers, they're on the path. How is Cray looking at this growing quantum computing area, and how are they? Do they have different strengths? Is everything going to move over to quantum computing at some point? Is there a transition point that's coming?
Yeah, that's a great question. Quantum computing it's real, right? There are problems. Quantum computers will work. There are lots of technical problems with building a working quantum computer. You may have had guests on that talk about this in the past, but it's very difficult to keep qubits. These are these quantum bits that can be kind of a 1 and a 0 simultaneously. It's very hard to keep them coherent. They tend to break down, so you can't do a long-lived computation, and it's hard to build very many of them, and you need lots of physical qubits in order to do all the error correction that allows you to simulate a reliable qubit. And so we're a decade away from having sort of practical quantum computers that could solve real problems like factoring large products of prime numbers, which the cryptography people are very interested in. So there's certain problems that quantum computers will be really good at. And when we finally get there, the Google thing, people, the IBM team debates, did they really do it? And, I think everyone can agree that if they achieve quantum supremacy, it was for a very specific, narrow thing that doesn't actually have practical use. But again, let's fast forward a decade. We will get to the point where we have practical quantum computers, and there are certain problems that they will solve incredibly well. Mm-hmm. So the one that I mentioned, factoring products of prime numbers, which is used for cryptography, that's really interesting. There's certain kinds of optimization, search problems that they'll do, and they'll be really good at simulating quantum phenomena. So quantum chemistry and quantum physics will get radically, transformed by having working quantum computers. But there's a whole class of other problems the normal sorts of problems that you use computers for, quantum computers will never really solve. You will never predict the weather on a quantum computer. You will never crash a virtual car on a quantum computer. You won't do earthquake simulations and all these things that, among other things, require a lot of data. Because quantum computers, while they can do an exponentially large amount of compute, the input to them and the output of them is really just those n bits. And so you have to have problems that have very little input data and very little output data, but have exponentially large compute. And for that, they'll be great. But for general purpose computing, not so much.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's good to learn, because it's everyone's like excited about quantum computing and what it's going to bring to us. But right.
Yeah, it's talked about like this magic bullet, like it's going to do everything.
Yes, and it definitely will not. The significant majority of things that people use classical supercomputers for will never be done on quantum computers. But there'll be a few areas that are just like hugely
amazing.
Improved.
Yeah. In terms of you mentioned when you're talking about the processors that you use, you mentioned the gates in the process. So you've got the chips and they've got their transistors in them. And we all know from our cell phone technology, stuff is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's been this idea of Moore's law with, this technology rapidly advancing and the power of processing getting faster and faster. And it's really been that way. We've seen computing it's just been growing so quickly. But there's the point at which you reach a physical limit of the ability of an electron or an atom to be able to pass through a gate.
Yep.
Are we there yet?
We're not there, but you can see there from here.
Okay.
It's getting close. So we've had this incredibly wonderful ride we've been on for literally several decades. Moore's law isn't a law, but it's an observation it's kind of an engineering prophecy, if you will, that people have been trying to execute on, and we've been doing it. And there's the companion to Moore's law, which says that every couple of years you can put twice as many transistors on a chip, is basically all that says. The companion to that was something called Dennard scaling, which basically said that as you kept getting the transistors kept getting smaller, you could drop their voltage, and the power efficiency improved at exactly the same rate that the performance improved, which means you got an exponential improvement in performance, but the power that it took, the electrical power, didn't go up. And so this was incredible, right? And then about a decade ago, Dennard scaling ended because the transistors got small enough that we couldn't shrink them anymore to drop the voltage level. And so now for the past decade, we've had Moore's law continuing, giving us exponentially more transistors, but power efficiency hasn't been keeping up. And so they've been getting hotter and hotter, to the point where now you can't even run, if you build a chip with as many transistors as you can put on that chip and run it as fast as you're able to, it'll literally burn up.
Wow.
So we become really power constrained. And that is what's making getting to this exascale, this next level of computing, very difficult. So we historically went up about a factor of 1,000 from a megaflop to a teraflop to a petaflop about every 10 years. And we should have been hitting an exaflop this year, but it's gotten harder because we're getting closer to the end of Moore's law. So Dennard scaling ended. So power efficiency hasn't been keeping up, but now we're in the last few generations of being able to shrink the transistors for exactly the reason you said. You're getting close to the atomic limits where you can't keep building a transistor. The current lithography, which is kind of the feature size, is down to currently about 7 nanometers. And a nanometer is
tiny.
Angstroms, right? And you're getting very close to atomic scale. And we can get down to 5 nanometers for sure, maybe 3 or 2, but we're in the last few generations.
And it'll probably slow down again, the way it continue to kind of slow down a little bit.
Exactly.
The power,
This is the problem, because we've all become addicted to more exponentially improving, computing performance.
I for one am happy. If my phone gets any smaller, I won't be able to read anything on
You won't be
so this is a good stopping point.
Everyone with
Not
Coke
shrink
bottle
my phone.
glasses.
your phone is getting exponentially faster performance, but you still can't get good call quality. So
Yeah, no, it's gotten missing.
But I mean, the computing world is kind of freaked out about this, because what happens if it just ends? If we can't get, we don't have anything to replace CMOS, which is the particular kind of silicon technology, complementary metal oxide semiconductor, the way we build transistors. If we can't replace that with something faster, then the joyride we've been on might end. The good news is, if you look back 100 years, we've gone through like 5 different discontinuities, from mechanical switches to electromechanical relays to vacuum tubes to discrete transistors to integrated circuits. And that doesn't say that there's going to be another one to some new technology, but it kind of gives me hope that we'll find something.
Do you know of anything that is in research that people are looking at that seems to be a front runner or a possible option?
There are a bunch of things that are being looked at, like graphene and spintronics and such, superconductivity, superconducting circuits. None of them look super promising at this point. We're also running up against technology issues having to do with memory technology, and there's some stuff coming down the pike that's a little bit more promising for memory. How do we replace the DRAM that you've got in all your devices? And there's where actually carbon nanotubes look like they might be interesting. So jury's still out, and we've got about a decade before it becomes a serious problem.
Yeah, a while back, we learned about memristors and the ability of memristors promising us a computer that can instantly turn off or turn on without having to be booted.
Actually, the memristor was invented by a guy named Stan Williams, who was a longtime employee of HP.
Right.
So I know that he's a great guy. Memristors right now haven't really panned out that well for the memory technology, but it turns out that they're really there's an interesting application of using the same technology to do a neuromorphic processor for artificial intelligence that can allow you to sort of simultaneously do a giant matrix multiply, which is the key operation when you're training big deep neural networks using memristor technology. So. Oftentimes, if you develop something for one application, you find, it actually works better over there.
All right, so it's going to be, the memristors are going to be involved in that AI world takeover. Good to know. As far as the exascale computers that you are going to be initiating in the next year or so, where are they going? What are the plans for them? I mean, do you know the kind of research that's going to be done with these? Because I know there's the U.S. government has purchased several of these exascale computers.
There have actually been 3 exascale systems that have been announced and contracts signed worldwide, and they're all 3 in the U.S. and they're all 3 in the Department of Energy. So it turns out that people may not know this, but the U.S. Department of Energy is really the leading institution in the world for building and using big computers. There are 2 halves of the DOE that do big computing. One is the Office of Science. So Oak Ridge National Lab and Argonne National Lab are both in the Office of Science, and they do open scientific research. So they're almost like a big university. They tend to focus a little bit more on energy things, but they're doing things like trying to improve the efficiency of wind turbine and farms, building next generation small modular nuclear reactors, chasing fusion nuclear energy, power grid planning, trying to design more efficient biofuels and engines, that sort of thing. But they're also doing the cancer moonshot is one of the big problems at Argonne National Lab. So they are really trying to use deep learning and simulation and modeling to go after cures for cancer. So they do kind of open science in lots of areas. The other half of DOE is the National Nuclear Security Agency. So the organization that's getting the big computer there is Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and they're the ones that keep track of our nuclear stockpile.
Yep.
So, it turns out that we banned blowing up nuclear weapons some number of years ago, which is a good thing, right? We don't do that anymore, but they still have to test them and make sure that the current stockpile is safe and do whatever they do. But now it's all done virtually. And so they're kind of the other organization within DOE that uses really, really big computers.
Yeah, and yes, and I'm glad. I want them to have the supercomputers. I want them to know what's going on with that nuclear stockpile and maintain our safety. That is such an important job.
Yeah,
Such an important role.
The thing I love most about my job is that I get to work with all these people and see what they do with our machines. Building the fastest computer is like, okay, that's neat. That doesn't actually do anything. It's what they do with the computers that is really, really rewarding. It makes you feel good about, helping them make the world better by advancing science and, industrial competitiveness, trying to build better materials and more efficient turbines and engines and all that sort of thing. So very cool to see what our customers do with these machines.
Oh, it's going to be incredible. I mean, I had the chance to visit, I believe it was Oak Ridge National Lab, and they were also doing some protein modeling. And so that's one of the things that I think is very exciting is the biological aspect and the application to help us, be able to potentially target new therapies, be able to figure out exactly what molecule in the body you can target and what it looks like. And so really visualize that lock and key phenomenon that we talk about so often.
Yeah. The old way of going after cancer was you look at the most common mutations of cancer and you try to figure out how those would interact with different drugs and how the mutation interferes with the protein social networks and all that. But the reality is that a good half or so of cancers are rarer forms. There's a long tail of the distribution of different types of cancer mutations. And what people are using high performance computing to do, among other things, is to look at the whole catalog of like 65,000 different cancer mutations that are known. And then for each one of them, do detailed molecular modeling of how that interacts with the DNA and with the protein network, so that we can do precision targeted therapies for individuals. So you take the information you have about a person, the specific cancer mutation they have, their specific DNA, other attributes about them, and then you can figure out targeted treatments and therapies for them. And it's really pretty cool.
And then cancers, they can take on epigenetic changes once the cells are already there. So they can even shift the target in the body at the same time.
And this is one of the areas where there's a lot of promise for what we see overall, this trend towards converged AI and analytics and simulation, where you can do a combination of sort of data analytics and deep neural nets and traditional simulation, all in a big workflow to sort of have a multifaceted attack.
It's really awesome. The first thing I ever saw the university computers being used for at UC Davis some 20 years ago was to model bobsled runs that I think they were giving to the U.S. Olympic team. But it was trying to, it was just simulating and seeing like how high up the wall you should be going or what speeds would be most efficient to make it down the.
Yeah, and don't even, if you go down the whole sports and computers track, there's all of this, money ball on steroids, if you will. Right. One of the machines that Cray sold a while ago was to a baseball team that later won the World Series. They wouldn't let us say who they were because they didn't want the competition to know what they were doing, to do really complex analytics. And in baseball, the big thing that you're trying to figure out is pitcher batter matchups. And so they keep track of all this data about specific pitchers and specific batters. But a given pitcher batter matchup, you won't have enough data there to really draw conclusions. But if they can compare this pitcher to all the other pitchers and cluster them together and figure out which pitchers are sort of all the same kind of pitcher and which batters are the same kind of batter, then all of a sudden you get way more data about the pitcher batter matchups, and you can start doing better analytics and figure out your baseball strategy. And so they at the time that we were doing this, they were collecting, I think, 40 terabytes of data for every baseball game.
Wow.
So if there'd be a pitch, you'd see the velocity and the 3D trajectory of the ball. You would have recorded how many milliseconds it took for every different field position to start moving and how fast they started running, and just incredible amounts of data getting
You
sucked.
probably need the humidity in the air to see how whether that curveball is really working that day.
How loud
It
the crowd was.
sounds like those computer scientists actually deserved some World Series rings.
Yeah, there you go.
It
Absolutely.
sounds like you need some data people on your team on the payroll, right, to be able to keep up with all of that potentially.
But it's the world is starting to get drowned in data, right? So I'm sure you've probably talked about this on TWIS before, about all of the data that's coming in and how businesses and governments and everybody else is trying to be more data driven. And we're every year we produce as much data as maybe every couple of years has been produced by all of humanity in the past. So there's this incredible amount of data, and they're all trying to figure out how to mine it and extract value from it and learn from it.
Or just transfer it. This is the thing we've heard about it with the project where I think we're doing the dark matter observations. I've seen it or hear it from people all the time. Yeah, I've got all this data. Just moving it to let people have access to it is now this threshold that we're going to have to work on to be able. We have we have computers that can do it. It's going to take you a week to get
Exactly. And there's this term called data gravity, which is you kind of want to do your computing where your data is, because it's really hard to move it. And of course, the public cloud people, the Amazons and Microsofts and Googles of the world, they want you to give them all of your data. We'll store your data, but it's kind of like the Hotel California, right? Your data can't check in,
Right?
It can never leave.
I think it's such a weird balance because
but you pay to get out.
Yeah, they're kind of hooking the general user on some of the benefits of that too. I think about that all the time, how like I get frustrated when my phone doesn't know what word I'm trying to type, but then I also get frustrated when my phone suggests things that make it very clear it was listening to me. So it's almost as though the utility of it, of having this data and me giving the data, if that can outweigh the cost of giving up the data, then it's probably people will accept it. It'll be fine.
Yeah. That's kind of a generational thing. I know that younger people, I think they're starting to think, privacy is not going to happen, and I don't really like that Google's watching everything I do. But hey, I'd rather see an ad for something I'm interested in than an ad for something I'm not interested in. And I can
that's how they got me hooked. I hate ads, and then when they started listening to me, I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. I finally an ad I want to click on. I started to like my ads.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We don't want to keep you all night. This is fascinating conversation. For finishing up our interview, I'd love to know these exascale computers that you are developing. These are brand new. These are new computing installations that will go in.
Yes.
What will happen to the old supercomputers?
Yeah.
Do they get put out to pasture?
Good one, Kiki. Are you claiming it?
Good question. It turns out that most of the people that buy Crays upgrade them multiple times over their life. Part of being green, people talk about trying to be green, and they mostly just mean better power efficiency. But it turns out that another part of being green is like not having to send your old computers to the landfill when you install a new one. So we try to build systems that can be upgradable over time. Now, every once in a while, the infrastructure changes enough so that you can't upgrade them. And when people are done with the computer, we actually take it back and we will resell it to someone else who wants something that's a little bit older. And so there's a lot of that goes on. And then ultimately we'll take it back. And if it's old enough so that we can't resell it, we will, go through the process to recycle it. There's a big, long process for that because among other things, there's some heavy metals and other things in there that you really do not want to pitch in landfill.
Yeah, what's the lifetime for some of these parts? Are I assume they wear
Yeah,
out.
I mean, it used to be like every 3 years or so,
Yeah.
you'd want to upgrade or replace your computer just because of the rate that they were getting faster. That's starting to spread out a little bit because the rate of improvement is slowing down. So
Mhm.
eventually, if they stop getting faster, people will keep their computers for a long time, right?
Right.
So you don't have to take your hammer and upgrade it every 3 years because the hammer will look roughly the same.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll see. I'm if they do last longer, I'm imagining, old supercomputers, that young college students would take them on.
They're very big.
They're a bit large. Yes, that's true. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with in terms of understanding supercomputers or what it is that Cray, as part of Hewlett Packard Enterprises, is going to be doing in the future?
Well, I just we've kind of talked about it. The cool thing about these machines is what people do with them, and that's not going to end. The one thing that's kind of interesting right now is we're seeing the what we call the enterprise world, the people that are sort of running businesses and that sort of thing. They're starting to have the same sorts of problems that the people at the national labs have already dealt with. How do we take AI and simulation and analytics and put them all together? How do we deal with these new technologies that are the results of Moore's law slowing down? And so it'll be interesting to watch some of that technology that was developed for the high end kind of translate down into the broader enterprise.
Yeah, it will. It'll be, I guess it's the computing trickle-down theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit. Where can people find out more about these supercomputers? Is there a location where they can go to learn more about Cray?
Well, if you just go to cray.com online, you will find links to all kinds of stuff, whether it's what people are doing with these computers. It'll get you can find out who's getting these big machines and go to their websites and learn about what they're doing as well. And then some of these places do take visitors, so you can stop by your local DOE lab and see for yourself.
That sounds like fun to me. I may just do that.
Ooh, TWIS field trip.
Field trips, I'm always in. Dr. Scott, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It has just been wonderful talking with you about these amazing computers.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a
All right.
wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody, this is This Week in Science. We're going to take a quick break right now, and we will be back with all sorts of science. I've got some crafty computers. I'm going to stay themed up for a little bit in the second half, and we've got bat guts and smart apes coming up in just a few moments with more This Week in Science. Stay tuned.
Can't explain the things you've heard with more than intuition. A line of reason shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need.
And This Week in Science has you to thank for helping us do what we do. You are a big part of how we're able to do everything that we do, our weekly show, pay for the technology that we use, our computers, all that kind of stuff. That's right. It is all you. Right now, it is TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar season. That it is. So if you are needing a calendar for 2020, or if you just need some cool art and you want a TWIS calendar, there you go. Or if you want to give a gift to somebody who loves animals and TWIS, go to twis.org. TWIS.org is where you can find the link to buy the 2020 Blair's Animal Corner TWIS calendar. Please do it now. That's right. Get in there so I can send you a calendar before the end of the year and hopefully in time for the holidays. If you do it now, I'll get it in the mail and then it'll get there in time for whatever holiday you celebrate. Let's do that. Twis.org. Twis.org is also where you can subscribe to This Week in Science. There's a big subscribe button. Click on that button. You'll be able to find links to the Apple Podcast portal, to Google's podcast portal, and to iTunes. Yes. No, I said iTunes. To YouTube. There's all these vowel sounds anyway. To YouTube. You can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Help us grow that channel. Yeah, help us keep YouTubing. And then finally, our Zazzle store is also where you can buy wonderful products leading into the holidays. You can find t-shirts and hats and mouse pads and tote bags and wrapping paper. I mean, it might not last very long, but it might be fun to have some Animal Corner themed wrapping paper under your tree or whatever, for whatever gifting purposes that you perceive coming into the holiday season. Oh, what did I forget? Patreon. There's the Patreon link. Yes, you can support us in an ongoing fashion. Click on the Patreon link. Become a patron of TWIS and help us keep going into the new year and buy Blair that computer that she needs. We're saving up the money, but we still need to do that. This is This Week in Science, and we cannot do what we do without you. We thank you so much for your support.
Can't explain the things you've heard with more than intuition. A line of reason shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need.
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science.
We are back. Hey, Blair.
Hey.
I think it's time for What Has Science Done For Me Lately? What has it done? Well, according to Topher wrote in to say, Dr. Kiki, what has science done for me lately? I am a pool operator in charge of 3 pools and a spa. Science allows me to keep an average of 500 people a day safe by properly filtering and sanitizing the water. Without science, the patrons enjoying the spa would be breathing in Legionella-causing Pontiac fever or Legionnaire's disease. Yikes. The children enjoying the splash pad who put water in their mouth, no matter how many times you warn them not to, would be exposed to nasties like Giardia, E. coli, and the newest concern, crypto. And that's not like blockchain crypto. No. Cryptosporidium is chlorine resistant and can live in chlorinated pools for up to 12 days due to its oocysts. Hey, great to know that now. Thanks, Topher.
Gross, look what we made.
Yeah. Science allows me to keep up to date with current health concerns of how to sanitize the water. Chlorine byproducts are very nasty, and swimmers inhale these gases the entire time they're in the water. Recently at the World Aquatic Health Conference, WAC, WAHC, I learned how other countries are limiting their use of chlorine and looking to a multi-prong approach to cleaning water for bathers. More filtration, biofilters, enzymes, etc. Without science, we would not be able to enjoy water parks, pools, and spas safely. Thank you, science. Topher from Plainwell, Michigan. And he's given us some links that I will be able to put on our website as well for those of you who are interested in information from the CDC on chlorination and cryptosporidium. Bah.
And that's to bring the point home a little bit. There was a number of deaths recently associated, I believe, in North Carolina with an exhibit at a fair where they sometimes will bring out spas as, like, you know, you could go look at all the new spas on the market as part of one of the merchant exhibits. And apparently about 4 people, I think, died from what they think was possibly Legionnaire's disease, but they were still looking into it when I was looking at this story. This was within the last month or so.
Wow.
from exposure to this spa water and the vapors that came from it. So it's not there's more to cleaning a pool than getting the dead leaves off the surface there. There's definitely a need for the science, because it is a much more dangerous thing that we are encountering than many of us realize.
Absolutely. And if anyone who has ever done the chemicals, the pool chemicals, it's chemistry. You're trying to get the pH, and you've got acids and bases and various things, and it's fun, but it is a serious business if you want to have a safe pool that also doesn't leave you smelling like a pool.
Yeah. Well, and if your levels aren't right, you have to shut down. It's very serious. But we also, of course, know that now that depending on the type of pool, sometimes if you have a saltwater or a sulfur pool, those also fight bacteria, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
There's
completely different systems.
Yeah. So there's different options there. We can't all just go out and swim in the ocean. So it's kind of important to be able to figure this out. It's such a fun, pleasurable experience. And the sooner you do it, the better chance you have of being able to enjoy it the rest of your life. People that haven't swam as kids, sometimes they have a really hard time taking the plunge as adults. So it needs to be clean for those immunocompromised children, right? So.
Absolutely. Topher, thanks for keeping the swimmers safe. I appreciate your letter very much. It was that was one that we have not heard previously, so I like that one. If you have a story, an email, a sonnet, a song, something, a haiku that you would like to share for What Has Science Done For Me Lately, send me an email, Kirsten, Kirsten, @thisweekinscience.com, or leave me a message on our Facebook page. That's This Week in Science over on Facebook. And hey, if you're watching on Facebook right now, hi. Hope it's all good. If you're on YouTube, hi. Hey, everybody. How's it going? It's time for science news.
Science.
Beep, 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 beep. Kids are like, what even is that? What's that sound?
Why
That's the sound you make before the science news starts. That's normal.
Exactly. That's always the noise. Okay, so of course I have a computer story because computers are awesome. It's part of our theme today. So, science researchers from the University of Maryland, and I want to say thank FADA for this story, they are introducing an AI, an artificial intelligence algorithm named Geneva. Geneva might sound like a nice female algorithm, but Geneva is short for genetic evasion. And Geneva learns how to circumvent censorship. They tested Geneva on computers in countries where the internet is censored, where internet searches are censored, China being one of those countries, and India and Kazakhstan was another. So 3 countries they tested Geneva in, and Geneva found a variety of ways to get around the censorship. So people using computers and searching the internet could search at their pleasure wherever they wanted and get around the blocks that are normally there. The researchers developing this algorithm are very interested in freedom of information and freedom of people to be able to search for information. They say that currently the evade detect cycle, so evading the censorship and being detected, this requires extensive manual measurement, reverse engineering, and creativity to develop these new means of censorship evasion. With this research, Geneva represents an important first step in automating censorship evasion. They're going to release the data and the code in the hopes that it will provide open access to information in countries where the internet is restricted. But additionally, they're thinking that not so much that it will be put on the computers of people who want to search the internet, but that it could be put on the server side. So sources of information like Wikipedia or say Google, the search engine, that on the server side, they could implement this technology to allow people to search from wherever they are and to be able to access this information, and that censorship blocks would not be able to have any hold on people.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So they Geneva evolves its genetic code. So it's got computer code, and it's inspired by biology, by the idea of evolution. It has a bunch of sets of instructions that are kind of based on nucleotides, like the nucleic acids, the bases that are the building blocks of genes. And so Geneva uses this idea of very small pieces of code that can be broken up. And instead of so when you search the internet, you send a whole bunch of stuff all at once. And anybody that's sniffing for that information can find certain tags and markers within that information that will let them know that you're searching for something that's not allowed, and they'll be able to block it, or their computers block it very easily. But in this particular situation, Geneva changes the genetic code, changes its programming, and uses these small pieces of code that can be sent not all at the same time, but potentially in little bits to search for information. So they they break up, they arrange and send data packets in very sophisticated, manipulative ways. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So it's the beginning of what could potentially be, a predator-prey kind of interaction of adaptation and evolution in computer programs that basically have to do with our internet freedoms.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is that, for every rule that we try to set out there, or a particular group of people tries to set out their particular country, the whole point of the internet and computing is being able to solve problems. So it just makes sense that somebody's going to be able to figure out a way around any roadblock that's placed.
Yeah, in the chat room, Noodles says, this sounds better than VPN. So yeah, I mean, could this potentially also allow people to get around, I don't know, I wonder if it would allow people to get around kind of the DC, what is it, the copyright, DCI, Digital Millennium, DMC, I forget it, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA. There we go. I got it. Yes, never mind.
What is that? Know. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was passed by Congress, and it allows companies and people to copyright software and movies and music, and it's what iTunes or Apple, it's what organizations, is what all the movie industry companies use to basically protect their copyright online, so that you can't download things for free. You're supposed to pay for them, or even after you technically buy them, you still don't own them, kind of a thing.
Right, which is why people put videos on YouTube as a mirror image to not get caught by that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. Once again, algorithms will get smarter, though. It's going to. It's all.
That algorithm is already such a smart guy.
Oh, Al.
Oh, algorithm. Moving on from computer programs and evasion, how about figuring out whether or not we really are special in the universe?
Oh.
I'm going to go with no.
No, of course we are. We're us. You're
Are we?
special, Blair.
Well, that is what
Really,
Mr. Rogers
though?
told me, but
Yeah, each
I'm
one
not
of us.
sure I believe it.
No, each one of us.
Researchers were interested in the question of, is DNA really all that special? And they wanted to figure out whether there are other kinds of chemistry that could create molecules similar to RNA and DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid, which are made up of the nucleic acids and then other component parts. So they started by defining what this nucleic acid component kind of be like. What would the base of a molecule look like? And then what limits or constraints did they need for the molecule? So they have to have a piece that another molecule can connect to and go, I recognize this. I'm supposed to fit here. I'm supposed to connect here. And so this would be like the adenosine, the tyrosine, cytosine, guanine, those nucleobases that are connected. And then also points that to connect this to scaffolding, to make so that it can all link together to create larger molecules. So they used a program called Molgen 5.0 to do this massive database search of data molecules that are in existence in the world that we know about, and to also take out molecules that they break chemistry rules, so to figure out exactly what could possibly be there. They used a different program called Pipeline Pilot to generate these structures and the chemical formulas and figure out if they missed anything or if everything was good. And really, they did all this. And, it's not like, oh, hey, there's a couple other possible structures for things like DNA and RNA. Nope. No. They counted some basically like 1.5 million. No, 1.16, 1,160,990 different structures that could exist in the universe that could act like DNA and RNA. Now, the question is whether or not whether all of them would do the things that DNA and RNA do. That's still the question. But there's over 1 million potential molecules out there that can connect together and don't break chemistry rules and could potentially, if not be the data storage that is replicable and life-forming, could potentially be used for data storage purposes. And so what this is going to maybe lead to is not necessarily, it could lead to the creation of, other synthetic life molecules, right? Would we call it life if it's not our DNA? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. That's like far-fetched out there, but the main application of this would be synthetic molecules that could be used for data storage that would potentially do a better job in some situations than DNA would. Yeah. So chemistry. It's a giant puzzle. There's so many combinations.
I recognize we could talk about this for like 20 hours, but every time I start thinking about this type of thing, I just get stuck kind of in this infinite loop in my brain where we decide what life is, but who's to say that there isn't life that, when we're talking about finding water on exoplanets, who says you need water? Who says you need DNA? Who says you need the type of DNA that we have?
Exactly.
So,
When we think about how you teach what life is in a basic biology class, you talk about, does it reproduce? Does it respond to stimuli? Does it consume? So there's this kind of checklist where all these kinds of things that we think about as constructs, as main tenets of life, aren't part of that checklist ultimately. And yeah, I feel like it makes perfect sense to me that in our giant universe, there is life. And that on top of that, why would it be life like us? Why would it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, well, the one thing that I would just toss out there is I think that the double helix, maybe a triple helix, but the double helix itself as a backbone, as a structure, is exceedingly robust for keeping these components together.
Mm-hmm.
A double helix is something that if you pull lengthwise or sideways, it still is holding itself together. So it is a very robust sort of base structure. I would guess that even if we're talking about potentially having different nucleotide type components being combined and being, operating this system, that something similar to a double helix would need to have emerged from a sort of selection process in order for it to be robust and turn into life. And
if it needs to be robust, does it need to be robust?
Well, maybe not if it's not in a solution like water. Maybe you're right. Maybe if it's just sitting on a beach, but then you're limiting interactions, you're limiting development.
Maybe it's something where maybe the type of life that is out there doesn't even need to be in order.
Okay.
There's all this kind of stuff. I'm just saying that we have all these kind of assumptions about what life needs, and I'm just, as food for thought, I don't have an answer, but who's to say?
Yeah, and then to the question of synthetic, what do you call it? Life? I sort of always think of my children, as synthetic versions of myself, right? Because they aren't actually me. They're based up of components that DNA and these sorts of things combined together with another person's DNA. But they're not. They're like synthetic versions of us. No. They're life. They're just right. And so if we get to the point where we have created a system that is self-replicating and can grow and can do these things, it's life creation. It doesn't have to be synthetic. There isn't a right way to have begun that journey in the first place, other than like if it's not primordial soup. But if we're creating a primordial soup, as it were, then aren't we just recreating the thing that makes life in the first place? So.
Well, I think the difference between organic life, the way that we think of it, is that occurs through biological processes, whereas synthetic is, we're talking about, okay, we took molecules in the lab and put them together in a very specific conformation, and it wasn't something that was driven by the wind and the mud and the salt water. It wasn't this thing. It we put it together in a particular way, and then we did something with that's synthetic biology.
But that's as nature did that too. There wasn't a biological process that got this started.
Sure. Chance.
That's what got started.
The biological process of chance.
Which biology is based on life, which then what is life? And then we're back in this circle again of what even is life.
Oh my gosh. This is the episode for people who never mind. Go sit, stare at the corner, think about what is life anyway? Oh my goodness. No. It's not life, it's just molecules, man. This is This Week in Science. Justin, what'd you bring?
I brought, let's see. What am I talking about? Global warming, the unbuckled baby in the backseat of modern day society, will increase the size of stalled high pressure weather systems that have already been producing some of the century's deadliest heat waves, according to Rice University study. These are called blocking events, high pressure systems that stay in place for days or even weeks. So the end result of this then being that polar vortex that comes down and passes through the Northeast over a series of days could stay there for a series of weeks. A drought situation, say in California, that could happen for 2 or 3, 4 months, could stay much longer. And much of this is being driven, and we've already been knowing this, because as the polar region heats up, there's less contrast between the airs that are swirling all the way around that the cold air at the pole, and that cold air at the pole interacting with the lower air is usually causing great amounts of turbulence and moving and wobbling, and so we get weather patterns that keep moving about and being active. As the temperature on the pole heats up, we have less of a dramatic effect in an interaction, and so weather patterns can begin to stall. As has been found by an algorithm, these guys did some math, using data sets from comprehensive climate model simulations, rice fluid dynamics, which I love that these guys are fluid dynamics because they're working with vortexes, and they're working with these very complicated systems, which we can model the atmosphere pretty awesomely with. This is Ibrahim Nabizadeh and Pedram Hassanzadeh and others found that the areas of blocking events in the northern hemisphere will increase by as much as 17% due to climate change. Their study is available online from Geophysical Research Letters. It's also co-authored by Dai Yang, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and the University of California, Davis, and Elizabeth Barnes of Colorado State University. One of my favorite things of this story is the Hassanzadeh and Nabizadeh, they came across the finally figuring out that their scaling models landed on the right one, having both gone to the DMV, their local DMV, and having to spend the entire day doing nothing but waiting. They optimized that time to select the model, what ended up being the correct model going forward, which I think
That's
is
funny. Yeah, so maybe we just need to send more scientists to the DMV to get more science done, right? No.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is another element to global warming is that it is weather. It is climate and weather are not exactly the same thing, but climate is a lot of weather data points put together. Pretty much,
So-
you can summarize it.
Yeah, the way that we talk about it when we talk to kids about the difference, or just general public, is I like to say that weather is what you wore today, and climate is your entire wardrobe. So you have kind of these fixed data points versus long-term trends. So
Correct.
the climate in San Francisco, I don't
Like
have
that
snow
clothing.
pants,
Yeah.
but the weather today, I wore a sweater.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, within the smaller pieces.
I love that example.
Yeah.
So the weather, this weather pausing, these blocks are as if you were not allowed to change that sweater for a week.
Right, like
Now you're
I
stuck
ran
with
out of
this
winter
sweater.
sweaters because I only have a couple. Because normally it's only cold for a couple days, but then I had to wear the same 2 winter sweaters over and over again because
Over
for
and
some
over and
weird
over and
reason
over
it
again.
stayed cold for a really
For a
long
month.
time.
Yeah. So this pausing is of course going to be pretty dramatic. There's another study along this line that was showing that the monsoon season is going to shift over Asia, which is where much of Asia gets rainfall that's required for food production and fresh water for humans to consume. That the monsoon pattern might move the monsoon. They're starting to build the models for very dramatic, not just temperature shifts. The temperature thing is going to be taking place in ways that we're not going to be as affected by directly as the extreme changes in what the local weather, what the local climate then, therefore, is going forward. And these blocking events are just one more way the unbuckled baby in the backseat of modern society could be flung free from the vehicle.
We don't want that to happen. No.
In other news, forgetting the Planet of the Apes may not be such a far-fetched idea after all. This is, of course, the classic sci-fi movie where some point in the future, apes have evolved to take the place that humans once held as the sentient ape on the planet. different ape. It's actually not far-fetched at all. It's just
Mm-hmm.
different great ape. This is new research from the University of Adelaide suggests that the great apes of today, the current great apes inhabiting planet Earth, are smarter than Australopithecus, our pre-human ancestor.
So we're not included this. So it's non-human great apes.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Oh no, actually, we can be part of it too.
They're including us in the data set.
We are included in this. Yes.
Okay,
well, I think that one was already figured out. That we were likely more intelligent than Australopithecus.
Yeah.
This is a group that included Lucy, the really famous leaky fossil find. So the study conducted in partnership with the Evolutionary Studies Institute at the University of Witwatersrand. That's Witwatersrand, that's the South Africa, I believe. And published today in Proceedings of Royal Society B, challenges the long-held idea that because the brain of Australopithecus was larger than many modern-day apes, it was smarter. What they looked at was the rate of blood flow to cognitive parts of the brain based on the size of the holes in the skull that passed the supply arteries. So it looks like this technique was calibrated in humans and other mammals and applied to 96 great ape skulls, 11 Australopithecus fossil skulls. And what they found, it looks like, first, this is quotey voice of Professor Seymour. And he says, the results were unexpected by anthropologists because it had been generally assumed that intelligence is directly related to the size of the brain. At first, brain size seems reasonable because it is a measure of the number of brain cells, neurons. On second thought, however, cognition relies not only on the number of neurons, but also on the number of connections between them called synapses. These connections govern the flow of information within the brain, and the greater synaptic activity results in greater information processing. Human brain uses 70% of its energy on synaptic activity, which therefore translates into 15 to 20% of our energy overall, and requires about 15% of the blood from the heart to occupy it. So seeing the increase in blood flow to the brains of great apes versus Australopithecus put them in the conclusion that the great apes probably had better cognitive ability than our pre-human ape-like ancestor.
What do you think? Do we agree with this? And I'm not sure. I need to look at the study to know the language they're using in this study. All of the articles talking about this have not said better cognitive ability. They say these apes are smarter. That our ancestors, that they put it in terms of intelligence, and cognitive ability and intelligence or smarts are not necessarily the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of the things they point to is bonobos and like Coco being able to learn sign language and this sort of thing is illustrating cognitive abilities okay, so this is based on the results that it is estimated the blood flow to Coco's cerebral hemispheres was about twice that of Lucy, because blood flow rate might be a better measure of information processing capacity than brain size alone. Coco seems to have been smarter. So they're saying smarter, but then...
well, but this gets tricky because the whole size of the brain thing, it feels like that gets debunked every few months and then gets reinstated and then gets debunked. And sometimes it's like, well, from one species to another, if you look at the average brain size, sometimes that's indicative of smarts. But then they throw that out, and then sometimes they say, well, within a species, the size of the brain and then that actually does. So I feel like this is kind of tough.
And I'd also like to add, we just had the conversation about these computers with their increased processing power and their issues with heat. And just because something, it's bigger, right? Bigger brain, using more blood because there's more cells and more potential. But it also could be a cooling factor, that there's more blood being used because it's also not just using nutrients because the cognition is more, but just there's more cells working.
Right. And then, of course, if you just think about evolutionary pressure, the fact that Australopithecus isn't around anymore means that, there was an advantageous adaptation that came after. So why wouldn't you be smarter?
Well, the other thing that I didn't get out of this study is I didn't see them looking at ancient apes. Maybe the ancient apes are smarter today than the current non-human great apes are smarter today than the great apes of the days of Australopithecus. I mean, maybe they're just getting a little bit better over time too. Mm-hmm. We can all be evolving. Nobody's stuck.
Nobody's stuck. Everyone, let's all evolve.
Yeah, let's do it.
We like evolution. Yeah, well, so the interpretation that this blood flow issue has to do with cognition, I kind of go, but I'm sure they've studied it and talked about it. But it'll come back up again, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Because you know what? Those Lucy's, they're dead, and so you can't go give them an IQ test.
Yeah, we can't put an iPad in front of them and see their problem-solving skills.
Nope.
Unless we got
we can't teach Lucy sign language, can we?
Justin, no. No cloning Lucy.
We could try.
We could try.
You have to take note.
All right. Well, now let's try to have some Blair's Animal Corner.
Oh, with Blair.
Yeah.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's animal corner.
Got Blair.
Well, here on This Week in Science, we love a microbiome story. Yeah. And I have a very interesting story about the microbiome of bats.
It's a bit batty.
Yes. Now, in general, when we look at mammal guts, we know that pretty much every mammal we looked at, from dogs to dolphins, they have a community of helpful bacteria. Their microbiome living inside them helps them with health and survival, helps them to digest food, helps them to fight off nasty bugs, and it's integral to survival. The other thing we know is that we usually see a microbiome that is unique or at least indicative of a species. And you actually see similarities along evolutionary history, where you can actually see who's related to whom and how diet is similar across species, all based on the species of bacteria in their gut. And we've talked about this with the red pandas and the giant pandas and all this kind of stuff. So this is a pretty extensively studied topic, except for in bats. So this is what gets crazy. The microbiomes of closely related bats can be totally different from one another.
Whoa. Totally different?
Totally different. So it suggests that having a community of helpful gut bacteria maybe is not so important for bats. Because if it was, you would see more similarities across similar species or even the same species in different locations because they have a similar diet. So it looks like the bats may not depend on bacteria the same way all of these other mammal species do. And that then you would lead to make sense that they might be able to survive just fine without a very specific suite of bacteria in their guts. How did they come up with this? They took samples of bacteria from the skin of the bats, the tongues of the bats, and the guts of the bats from almost 500 bats in 31 different species in Kenya and Uganda. This was in multiple locations as well. Then they compared the genetic codes present in the bacteria. They found that on the whole, bats had fewer bacteria species living in their guts than on their mouths and their skin. Already, whoa. That's bizarre. What's more, the kind of bacteria living in bat guts varied from species to species with no apparent evolutionary pattern. There was no indicative link between related bat species and their gut bacteria. So that's super weird. Then they found, so essentially no relationship between the bat microbiome and bat evolutionary history. They also found is that the microbiome varied based on environment as well. The same species of bat in 5 locations could host 5 different microbial communities, even though they have pretty similar diets. So normally, you'd be able to guess all sorts of things about an animal and their relatedness to other species based on their microbiome, but that is not the case in bats. So there is a specific host identity, so the species of the bat, that can help identify some of the species in the microbiome, but it is not strict. So it's really hard to decipher just based on that. So the theory here is that actually this has to do with the fact that bats fly. Bats have really short guts, which is something they have in common with birds. So with bats, it can take food just 15 to 30 minutes to pass through their digestive system. That's at least a third as long as it would take for a similarly sized rodent. Yeah. So, and the way that they do that is by having just less digestive tract for it to move down. And that's because you can't be carrying around, quote, non-essentials. And this is why you'll see, I've talked about it before on the show, birds, if you see a bird perched and they poop, chances are they're about to take off. They're getting rid of that little bit of extra weight before they fly. And it's just the same for bats. They need to get rid of any excess weight before they fly. And so they need to process their food very quickly. Because they have that shorter digestive tract, that means that there's not as much habitat for the microbiome, you could say. And so it might totally upset their relationship with the microbiome. This does also tell you, though, that if the majority of their microbiome is on their skin and in their mouth and not in their gut, and that it's highly dependent on where they live, that means they're very susceptible to environmental change. So they consider this a quote-unquote transient microbiome. So if their microbiome changes rapidly because their environment changes rapidly, that could actually impact them negatively as well. So, of course, there needs to be a huge amount of additional study here. This is just kind of a giant aha moment where we recognize that bats are super weird when it comes to the microbiome. So this is an opportunity to look into this further. I did a little digging, too, because they compared them to birds. And the microbiome of birds is very understudied as well. For every species of bird where they've looked at microbiome, there's at least 10 mammal species that they've looked at the microbiome. So there's really not a lot of information out there on bird microbiomes either. So I would be very interested to see if there's a correlation there, if it's similar, the way that the microbiome is related amongst species of birds versus species of bats.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to know. This is, I mean, there's so much, as we talked about with Tobin Hammer, there's just so much we don't know about the microbiome. And to find out that there are many species of insects who potentially don't even need a microbiome. Right? So this just when you start thinking in that direction from a different framing of microbiome and what is necessary and what is not necessary and why you would have one or why you would not have one. And like it brings up all sorts of different possibilities.
But then this also makes sense why probiotics are part of the conversation in trying to solve white nose syndrome in bats. There's all sorts of stuff here that kind of clicks into place potentially, but bats, they're an enigma.
Wrapped in a mystery.
Yeah, they have all sorts of stuff to teach us. I can't wait to learn more. And speaking of animals that have much to teach us that we didn't know anything about before, I also have a story about orcas, killer whales.
Yeah.
And new drone footage. This drone footage was gathered non-invasively. They had a camera hundreds of feet above the whales, and the whales, as far as they could tell, could not tell that it was there, did not respond to its presence. They combined that with underwater microphones, tracking devices on Chinook, which is their main prey in that area, what they're going after. And they also had some underwater footage. And all of that together, they were able to follow one particular pod of orcas. And they found a lot of interesting stuff. They were trying to figure out kind of like where the food goes, how they follow the food, what specific food they're eating, so that they can kind of extrapolate larger environmental impacts and how to protect the animals. But they stumbled across something else entirely. So one, they found that there was a baby in the pod they were following, and the baby repeatedly was nuzzled by its mother and would slide along the mother's body, touching the mother's body the whole time, seemingly just for fun, and would playfully tail slap mom on the head. And the same baby they found toting a salmon around in her mouth for 2 days. She was only 3 months old, so she was entirely feeding on milk still. She was not going to eat that salmon, but she was carrying it around. So the question is she teething? Is she pretending to be a grown-up? Is she learning how to be a grown-up?
Oh, she's got a doll.
Yes. So there's a couple things here that it makes sense. They're mammals. They're social. Of course, they'd want to be touching each other all the time. The mother would want to reassure the baby. Of course, there's something that the baby is learning from the mother and other members of the pod. But this is something that hasn't really been observed before. And so this is, it was very sweet. One of the researchers said that they like to, act like scientists, but, quote, it took our breath away.
Oh,
yeah. We like to think we are just hardened research scientists, but it tugged at our heartstrings. Yeah. So
as it would. I mean, people are people, and
Yeah,
but
and
it's
so
neat
this
to
is
see this kind of connectivity between other animals, other mammals.
absolutely. And so this is enlightening, to say the least, for an animal that it's hard to think about it now, but not that long ago, killer whales had a pretty bad reputation, hence the name, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to see this, but it also will have impacts on researchers' understanding of pod dynamics and how they move. And so they were supposed to be monitoring the movement of this Chinook versus the killer whales, the orcas. They kind of stumbled upon this whole other element of it, which is, maybe they might be following these salmon because it's the best food source, but they also might be following the salmon because it's a good way to teach the baby how to hunt. Who knows?
I'm sitting here and watching it right now, the mother playing with the baby.
Oh my goodness.
It's very sweet.
Play is really important. We've talked about that on the show with the rats that get tickled by researchers, and that's their reward. Play is a huge important part of life, especially if you're a social creature.
Yeah, from what we've seen from research, that social animals especially play is a big part of learning about your connection with other animals, with other individuals, in whatever your social group is.
Yeah, so if I can just use this as I'm going to quickly step on the soapbox and step off to say, and the same is true for human children as well. Yes. Play is very important for human children and adult children as well. Humans of any age. Play is important to develop our social skills and to stretch those muscles. And don't forget to play.
Don't forget to play.
And don't forget human touch when it's appropriate.
That's right.
Touch is also important.
Mm-hmm. That oxytocin, right? When appropriate.
Yes. When consensual and appropriate.
Yeah. Moving into our quick stories for the end of the show. Speaking of touch, well, sometimes a touch can turn into I'm a big black hole and I'm throwing a star out of this galaxy. Just get out.
No.
Get out of here. Researchers at the Australian National University have discovered a star that is traveling through our galaxy at record-breaking speeds, 10 times faster than most stars. It is traveling at millions of kilometers per hour, 20,000 light years away, which in terms of the galaxy is, it's like pretty close, I guess. They used the 3.9 meter Anglo-Australian telescope at the ANU Siding Spring Observatory to look at the dispersely or sparsely populated edge, the outskirts of the Milky Way, and they found this star that apparently, based on its speed and its trajectory, they tracked it back to the center of the galaxy. And they're pretty sure that it got slingshotted out of our galaxy as its trajectory is going to make it leave our galaxy pretty soon. It's on its way out. So the same way that we've seen some asteroids passing through our solar system, these interstellar interlopers, well, there's some stars that are potentially transiting out of our galaxy to visit maybe other galaxies far, far away.
Very active quasar activity going on in the center of our galaxy.
Yeah.
Very active.
Very active stuff. We got a big old black hole there, that's Sagittarius A prime. And then my final story, a little hiccup. There's just a little bit of a hiccup because researchers studied babies. They put EEG recorders on the outside of newborn babies' heads and also around their diaphragms to study what is going on in the brain when babies hiccup. We know that adults hiccup sometimes randomly. It can be kind of annoying, but there's this, nobody knows why we hiccup. Babies hiccup. No, it's a reflex, and nobody really understands exactly why. And the researchers isolated these contractions of the diaphragm, found that they lead to very specific electrical pulses within the brain. There are 3 peaks of electrical activity that occur after a contraction of the diaphragm. So there's a feedback loop. So similar to any muscle in the body for proprioception, when you contract your muscles and move them around, it sends a signal called the afferent signal back to your spinal cord, which then takes the signal to your brain to let your brain know that you're moving. The diaphragm does the same thing. When it contracts, it sends a signal to the brain to let the brain know that it has contracted. And so now they know what this signal looks like in the neonatal brain. And what they think is going on is that hiccups in adults are probably just a leftover from this baby stage of learning how to breathe through conscious control. Our breathing happens through reflex. You will breathe unless something stops you from breathing, but you can control your breathing. You can hold your breath, you can breathe faster, you can breathe more slowly through conscious control, and this is through control of the diaphragm.
And now I have to consciously control my breathing. It was automatic until you pointed out that I can have conscious control over my breathing, and now I have to be conscious. Okay, breathing.
So if I can throw an anecdote into this, the puppy that now lives in my home,
that now lives in your home, your new puppy.
My new puppy has been getting hiccups. She gets hiccups like once a day. And I was looking into it, and apparently that's a puppy thing. That's a thing that puppies get, but adult dogs don't normally get.
Yeah.
So this is very interesting that it's something that that is a newborn baby thing as well. It's,
Yeah.
She's
So
to breathe.
breathe, puppy. No, the hiccups are good. They're teaching her how to breathe. These hiccups are at potentially, this is what we think now. This is the newest cutting edge hiccup research.
But then what triggers it in adults? I'm so curious because there has to be some sort of sensory input that's triggering that old kind of vestigial
It is
reflex.
yeah. I mean, it could be something else, but this is what is thought now that it is a vestigial reflex.
But so there has to be something that's triggering it.
It just proves that all of human lifespan is prolonged infancy.
Right.
Truth.
We just never grow up all the way.
Yeah.
That's all.
Learn how to control your diaphragm, people. All right. Who's next? Who's got a story?
Well, since we were talking about babies, I'll throw something else out about babies.
Why would you throw things out having to do with babies? Why
Don't
are
throw
you
out the
throwing
babies.
babies
I'm
out?
just throwing some baby teeth at the wall to see what sticks. This is a piece of research from McMaster University, and it's about human teeth. Apparently, your permanent molars carry lifelong health records dating back to the womb to actually be indicative of the nutritional value that your mother carried while she was pregnant with you. Particularly looking at vitamin D, because dentin, the material under our enamel that makes up most of our teeth, forms in microscopic layers, and vitamin D, actually a deficiency in that creates a dark streak. Nothing we would notice, but something that if you had a microscope and you were cut open a cross section of a tooth, you'd actually see rings, kind of like a tree ring. And so that actually can give you all sorts of information about the vitamin D that was present in your life and in your mother's life when she was carrying you. My favorite example of that is the early colonial settlers in Canada who were wrapped head to toe because it was so cold, would commonly develop conditions like rickets or die prematurely from other conditions related to poor vitamin D. And that is something that you can see in the teeth of the babies, even if it wasn't true for the babies. If the babies didn't have vitamin D deficiency, but the mom did, you'd see that in the molars.
Good to know. Track the deficiency to see if it ever was there.
Yeah, and just since I'm sure someone will ask,
me your tooth.
We are talking about adult teeth, which do form in your skull when you are in the womb. They're just inside your skull still. They don't come out yet. So they emerge at around age 6, but they do form in utero. So they carry that even though they're adult teeth.
Cool. Justin, what do you have?
Global warming.
Oh, great.
The drunk teenager on a double dare with the keys to the future health and safety of our planet. The faulty light switch in the gas leak of industrial garages is... So rising CO2 emissions, obviously changing our climate. It's also changing the pH levels of our oceans, making them more acidic. Bad for the coral reefs, which, as we have learned from Blair, make 50% of the oxygen on planet Earth. Other chemicals processes are also being affected in the ocean. There's a research team taking measurements in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Japan between 2013 and 2016. They discovered that in the subarctic region of the Pacific near Hokkaido, the water's lower pH is causing a chemical reaction in the waters, which is producing a significant increase in N2O production. Moreover, they conclude that if pH levels keep falling at the current rate, the N2O production rate in that part of the Pacific could rise by 185 to 491% by 2100. And as far as greenhouse gases go, it is 298 times greater than CO2 in its greenhouse gassy causing situation. So the paper is published in Nature Climate Change. And so it's just we're finding all kinds of great new ways in which global warming is going to accelerate now. And then this final story was sent in
Get
by
me off this
Minion
roller coaster.
by Minion Dave. It's one off here, but this is they found a bacteriophage. Well, they found a bacteria that was associated with liver disease, and this is one of the reasons people need liver transplants. It's maybe drinking too much. These alcoholic hepatitis livers. Many of the time, if you get diagnosed with this, 75% of the patients with severe alcoholic hepatitis die within 90 days of being diagnosed.
Yeah.
Them's not good odds.
It's not.
They applied a bacteriophage to mice that attacked the specific bacteria that was seen growing on these livers, which could have been correlative. Diseased liver. Now it's this bacteria that's normally there in small amounts is there in increased amounts, but is it really affecting anything? Maybe this is just a symptom of the diseased liver. Well, the bacteriophage killed the bacteria that was growing on the livers, and they all survived. It basically cured the mice. So whatever the disease trigger was, actually the bacteria that was growing all over the liver was causing the problem. It wasn't just a correlative symptom of having a diseased liver. So
yeah, well, I mean, they still have the diseased liver, and the alcoholic hepatitis still needs to be fixed, but you're less likely to die if you get rid of the bacteria. So it's like, hey, let's get rid of the bacteria problem, which leads to a big issue, and then we can fix the liver issue and keep moving forward.
Yeah, but you're talking to an alcoholic liver who's going to tell you, hey, if I'm not dead now, I'm having another round. Because I was 1 minute, I was told I had 90 days to do all the drinking I could, and now I've been told I'm not dying in 90 days. It's cured. No, actually, sure, you're not cured. Thank you very much. I'm going to head out now. No, actually, sure, there's a treatment that you should. Oh, forget it.
Hello, Tangent. What?
That's how alcoholic livers talk, haven't you?
I have never talked to an alcoholic liver.
Oh,
Not ever.
You have talked to many
missing
more
out.
than you might have recognized.
That's very possible. It is very possible. Thanks, Minion Dave, for that story. Yeah, I think it's real. That story is really interesting from the perspective of there are these bacteria that normally aren't a problem, and they're in the gut, and then they can get into the liver somehow. How do these bacteria go from the gut to the liver, and how do they then become a problem when they're normally not a problem? I think that's an interesting question. But in the meantime, use the phages.
Yeah. Phages.
Go phages. We've come to the end of our show.
Have we done it? Have we completed another episode of This Week in Science?
We have. We have done it. We have come to the end of another show. I'm doing a lot of inhaling here. Breathe, everyone. Breathe. I'd like to do some shout outs, some thank yous to people who help out with the show and make it possible. Thank you to Fada for your help with the show notes and with social media and helping in the YouTube chat room. Thank you to Gord McLeod for managing our main chat room. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show every week so that I have a nice audio file to edit and turn into the podcast. And I would like to say thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Paul Disney, Ed Dyer, Andrew Swanson, Craig Landon, Andy Groh, Ed, Stu Pollock, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prathers, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Richard Porter, Mark Masaros, Jack Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill K, Bob Calder, Eric Knapp, Richard, Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Josiah Zahner, hey, that's a new name, Howard Tan, Go McKay, Donald Mundis, Sarah Forfar, Dan K, Matt Bass, Darwin Hannon, Patrick Pecoraro, Ben Bignell, Jean Tellier, John Gridney, Corinne Benton, or Adam LaJoy, Sarah Chavis, Rodney Lewis, Tiffany Boyd, John Bertram, Mountain Sloth, Seth O'Gradney, Stephen Albaran, John Ratnaswamy, Dave Friedel, Daryl Myshak, Paul Ronovich, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Noodles, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zuknarek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Artyom, Rick Ramus, Paul, John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Suzuki, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Steve Leisman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie, Gary S., Robert, Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessen Flo, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, and E.O. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if anyone out there is interested in finding out about Patreon, you can go to TWIS.org or go directly to patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show, so far, it's just the TWIS trio. That's right. So far, it's just going to be us next week. No interviews scheduled at this point. We'll let you know through social media if we get one. But as usual, we will be broadcasting online live, 8 p.m. Pacific time, twis.org/live, where you can watch and join the chat rooms. Don't worry if you can't make it. You can find our past episodes at YouTube or twis.org.
Thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, remember to tell your friends about TWIS. And if you didn't enjoy the show, you should still tell them, because one of your friends will probably appreciate it very much because they probably like science more than you.
Absolutely. We're waiting right here. For more information on anything you've heard today, on the show at least, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. That's TWIS.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts and other listeners. While you're there, you can also click on the picture of the horned frog in the upper right corner to order the 2020 TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar.
Nice. And if you'd like, you can contact us. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistmeaning@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to talk about, a suggestion for an interview, what has science done for me lately, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness, I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science, This Week in Science, This Week in Science, 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 This Week in Science, This Week in Science, This Week in Science, 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 This Week in 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 Science.
And we've now come to the after show. Please. Do I hear puppies? Do I hear puppies? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I gotta see the puppy. How do I turn this off? Remove from stream.
She was too sleepy to go out.
Hi, cutie.
Which means she's gonna have to go out any second.
Hi, cutie. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, Corgi. You got a Doge.
I got a Doge.
You got a Doge. That's
a Doge.
awesome. She's so cute. How old?
She is 11 weeks.
Oh, she's a baby.
She's a baby.
Oh my goodness.
Look at
I
that.
want to eat her.
Her name is Sadie.
Hi, Sadie. Don't eat the microphone, Sadie. Oh, look at her little short legs. Oh my goodness. Why a corgi? I mean, other than so cute, but
So I love all dogs, of course.
I know.
Brian really likes corgis, I think, because they look like foxes. And so we've actually been looking at
Corgis don't look like foxes.
they're look at their face.
That doesn't. She doesn't look like a fox.
It's a fox face.
Okay.
But anyway,
okay, go for that.
he likes them, and we've been looking at corgi mixes at rescues all over the Bay Area for a while. And then my friend who lives in Denver put in to be a foster parent for rescue puppies, and 2 days later. Got a call. The USDA shut down a puppy mill, and 13 puppies had to get placed immediately through this rescue shelter. And so she ended up with 2 of them. And she kept one and brought me the other one when she was coming into town anyway on Friday.
Aww.
So it just kind of all happened. So
And this
the
is
rescue
adoption and not
She was
fostering or anything.
no, this is she is ours.
Yours. Aww. And she's a puppy.
She's a pup.
Oh, this is cute. That's so cute.
I know, I woke you up. Sharing with everybody.
You're like, wake up. Come
I'm
see
sorry,
everybody.
I'm sorry I woke you up.
She's like, it's so late.
Sorry I woke you up. I know.
It's so late.
I know. Well, you didn't want to go out.
Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Look at those little legs. She's going to jump. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's adorable. I'm in love with your dog.
Well, she's waiting here for you.
Oh,
Come say hi.
oh, who's a cute little puppy? Oh, what's going on? Hi, hi. Hello.
I know.
Hi.
Hello.
Who's a cute
She
little
can't
puppy?
hear you because she's not wearing headphones.
She can hear. Oh yeah, look at those ears. That's a
look,
puppy
she
who
can
can hear
hear.
me. She can hear through your headphones. She can hear.
I
Oh,
bet.
yeah. Oh yes. Oh, it's a puppy. Oh, it's a little puppy. That's a very cute pup you got there. Oh, not probably able to arrange by next week, but I went to a talk that was very timely because it synced up with my stories for this week.
Ooh.
A guy,
Climate-y.
went to a talk by Jason
Hey, I'll put me
Box,
down.
who is apparently a leading climatologist.
Hmm.
I'm
Mhm.
looking for the confirmation pictures I took of. Jason Box. He is
BOX?
BOX at climate_ice.
What?
At climate_ice.
Oh, Twitter. I see.
Is the
I
Twitter?
see. He's
Is
a professor. Hello, Jason. I see pictures of you.
yeah. So very good talk. Although he did have the disclaimer that you should not invite him to dinner parties.
He
Because
sounds perfect.
the updates aren't really.
Is he depressing?
Well, he obviously is passionate about his work. But yes, the field that he's gone into is not like, hey, more great news from my field. It's more like, hey, we did this
Right.
amazing study where we combined all this information data and we got all this great analysis. The news is really bad, but it's exciting that we got this news. He has, I think, some fascinating insights onto glacial melt in Greenland.
Mm.
And some of the accelerating factors that are just being discovered that his research has come upon that is not yet in IPC models. So he's
Wow.
been collecting some quite a bit of data over decades in traveling to Greenland and doing research. And these are glacial melt properties that are, as of yet, not in IPC data in terms of effect. And he has some modeling that is doing different sea level rise and different temperature predictions based on this new information that he's added to previous data. So would be a very fun talk.
We would have a good conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Blair would enjoy this conversation as well, tied into the work that she's doing. So
Totally.
he is, however, he's an American who studied
Working in Denmark,
but is in
Greenland.
Denmark. Has been a professor in Denmark, I think, for the last 6 years or something like this. So he's my time. So it might be as tricky as it is for me. Yeah, but he could be an early riser. This could be the time he normally gets up and heads to work. You never know. But that would be an interesting one to reach out to. That was real recent. And also, what was his name? Mann? What? Something?
Michael Mann?
Thank you. He's got a book out, so that might be timely.
Michael Mann? Does he have a book out?
Is it Michael Mann? Is it the emotional intelligence of animals?
Oh, no.
not
That's
Michael
Franz de Waal.
It's Franz de Waal. Thank you. I'm sorry. Franz de Waal has a book out and has been talking about emotional intelligence within animals.
Oh my God. Okay, there's this NPR
Thank you.
podcaster, Maddie Stone. She just put things in perspective for me on Twitter. There's this thread that's going around. There's only 1 month left in the decade. Actually, it's like 6 weeks. But what have you accomplished?
Oh, no.
Yeah, and people are like, blah. She wrote her answer, traveled approximately 43 billion miles relative to the galactic center.
Nice.
Yes. Good
I
one.
mean, I covered some distance in the last decade. Yes.
There you go.
10 years of travel, 43 billion miles. We have, rubber to the road.
We've done probably 400 episodes.
Yeah.
Wait, this year or this decade?
No.
It's the
Decade.
decade.
The decade.
Oh, you take
yeah.
a whole decade and you compile it? Oh, well, yeah. Too many to count, too few to mention.
Decade.
What
What have I done in the last decade? Everything.
Nothing. She has to go out soon.
She's got to
so
go.
2 things before I forget. One, let me know when you're ready for
Calendar.
calendars.
Yes.
I do just want someone to get their eyes on it before, in case I did something really dumb. If you could just take a cursory glance at the month.
Well, you've gotten better. I remember the first calendar with the 2 Decembers was a little.
Yeah. And then, I put Sketchist on there. I removed the day before that. It just says no live show. And then you can both tell me if you change your mind. But we are doing a show on December 30th. Right now, there is not a live show on December 23rd. 1 show off. So.
Oh.
Wait, what?
We had gone back and forth on the 2 weeks of winter break and whether we should take a week off to be with family or travel
next
or
year?
whatever.
Not this year, though.
Correct. Next year. So next year,
thank you for clarifying.
We settled on taking the 23rd off of 2020, but doing a show on the 30th, which I'm cool with. Whatever. Heaven knows every other podcast in the world takes breaks for holidays, so it's whatever is best for everyone else and whatever. I think 1 week is not a bad idea, but whatevs. So I think that's the only thing otherwise that has to be looked at. And then just let me know and I'll get our code and we'll order away.
We could potentially do both of those. But the 30th we should do. Yeah, that would be the 30th. That'll be our review show.
Right. Oh, did I put that? Does it say year in review on there?
I can't find it.
Oh.
Where's you? I can't find your invitation.
Oh, I'll resend it right now.
Yeah. I can't find it. I don't know why.
No. Oh no. Okay, my other thing was I think I figured out where I could put a desktop computer.
So you're thinking desktop and not laptop now.
Yeah, because I have the Chromebook. So for travel, I have a laptop. I don't need 2 laptops.
Right.
You can. I assume you can get a much bigger processing bang for your buck in a desktop.
Yes,
desktop.
That is correct.
Tower thing than you could
Yes.
in a. So that'd be a good way to do it.
Yeah, so that's part of it too. And then I mean, as it stands now, I'm stacking a bunch of things and setting everything up, and that takes like 25 minutes every week. And if it was on a desktop, then it would just be turn it on and start the show. It wouldn't be this whole like let me run this cord and whatever. So anyway, let's look. Okay, so first let me just see, since I'm in here, what I did for December. We had the TWIS year in review is the 16th of December. And then we had the 30th as just a like bonus show since should we switch those?
Did we change our minds again?
Yeah. So last time we talked, we had said the year in review would be on the 16th, no show on the 23rd, and then just a normal show on the 30th. I think maybe because you were worried about travel with family, and so you didn't want to schedule a year in review show for a week that we might have to cancel or one of us might be missing.
Right.
I think that's why we did that.
Yeah, I just know this year it's all falling on the days of, so that's what makes it hard. Yeah, it's so funny. Seriously, catch me in different moods on different weeks, and I have different answers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, seriously, looking at the calendar right now, I'm like, oh, I could totally do a 23rd and 30th. Why not?
Yeah. Give yourself a break.
I'll take a break. Yeah. But we do have a show on the 30th, right?
I mean, that's what we have there right now. Like I said, I'm not married to it either way.
I think the 30th, wouldn't it be best to do the year in review on the 30th?
Yeah, I think you were worried about maybe missing that show,
Not-
and so scheduling it for a different day. But
No, let's just, I mean,
Move
who
it?
knows? Leave it. I mean, I think the year in review show on the 30th. That'll
Okay.
be fine.
okay.
Yeah, as opposed to a bonus show. I would like
Okay.
to put it there.
Did you get my invite?
Let me check. Check in the email. Check in the email. No.
Change this to the 30th.
And a bunch of stuff. Nose is getting sniffly. I'm going to Madison, Wisconsin very early tomorrow morning.
What for?
Madison, Wisconsin?
Ah,
What's
They're
in
early
Madison,
in the morning.
Wisconsin? What's there?
a conference.
Oh, speaking of things,
The Sigma Xi conference.
oh, that sounds fun and intriguing. And I have no idea what Sigma Xi is. Sketchfest.
Yes.
We're going to be sketchfesting.
Sketchfest. Yes. Are you going to be back in the United States for that?
Well, it's a good question.
Should we get like
So-
a Justin stand-in?
Maybe.
Oh
You
yes,
know,
like a cardboard Justin.
The thing is, I kind of tuned out when the two of you were talking about scheduling and when we were doing shows. Because I usually figure out where I'm going to be for doing TWIS based on the rundown I get at the beginning of the month.
Oh, okay.
This is about how that's about the limit to my future predictive planning abilities. I was watching this great TED talk about procrastination.
Yeah.
Where they have this.
But you
sort of-
haven't seen it yet, right?
No, I did. I finally saw it. It's been out for years. I finally saw it. And it's got this great. It's like here's the here's the practical mind at the wheel of your life, and the procrastinator has this monkey that jumps in and takes the wheel, and it's not until the panic monster comes along that scares off the monkey that the rational captain can take the wheel again. And I'm watching this and like. And part of why I procrastinated watching it is because, like, I don't want to know what the problem with procrastinating is. I don't want to be faced with this because my monkey didn't want to be scared. But there really is, like, I am absolutely that monkey at the wheel most of the time when it comes to planning future event things. Not in everything, but certainly in procrastination, my monkey is largely in control. So, where will I be the 16th of some month next year?
January. That's very
January.
soon.
Like next
soon.
year. It's next year.
I know.
It's
but
2020.
it's like a month and a half. It's like 2 months away. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you say it like that, it seems sooner. But
Sooner,
then there's this
yeah,
whole month
yeah.
of not having anything to do with it that has to happen first. So, this is what happens. So, I don't know. I can try to. The thing is, then we have February. We're also back in Seattle. I would
Yes.
like to do both events.
Cool.
And I think it will be tough to do the Sketchfest one. But we'll see. I might have no issues whatsoever doing it. Might just be fine.
All right.
But I'll have to tell you
Closer to the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
because I don't have
Okay.
I am going to be back Christmassy times in the States, but I hadn't planned out much beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you like moonlighting as a handyman to like pay the bills? Like, what's your?
No, I got some parting gifts from my previous employment.
Oh, I see.
Work it.
And I'm going back to college.
Going back to college.
Oh.
That's like going back to Cali.
Yeah, I was trying to do this like a year ago, and it just didn't work out. But now I'm like, I have the time, so I'm gonna do
Nice.
some schooling in this next year. I'll be a student, like with all the kids in the college.
What college are you going to?
I am going to the California Junior College Network online.
Oh, okay.
So
Very cool.
technically, I am enrolled at American River College.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Mhm.
But it allows me to do online coursework throughout the community college.
Throughout the stratosphere,
Mhm.
from wherever you may be.
Yeah, it's actually pretty awesome. I was looking for the online thing to begin with because who knows? Like now you're talking about planning for a whole year. But then yeah, so then I looked at the one campus and then quickly discovered that also meant that I could take the online coursework from all of the campuses, which is really a superpower and being able to put coursework together. So that's my plan.
Nice. Cool. Did you get the invite, Kiki?
No.
What the heck?
It hasn't shown up. I'll check my trash.
Let me go to. I'll use the other email.
Yeah, I was searching for the original one that you said you sent, and I'm like, oh, I actually don't see that either.
Okay, try now.
What are you inviting to? What's going on?
To
The
see
calendar.
the calendar. So, yes.
This year's?
The
Yeah.
new one.
2020.
So I
Next
can-
year's.
2020.
We need to order.
I need to do some proofreading, proof checking, proofing. There it is.
Great. It's not. Okay, so Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, I've now sent it to 3 times.
It just came to Kiki Finch.
Yeah, so that's not the one I just did because you said you didn't get it.
Weird.
But I have now
didn't.
sent it 3 times to the other one. I mean, granted, probably TWIS isn't in the subject line
Mhm.
because it's being sent directly from Mixbook. So maybe it's in your spam, but oh well, you got it. That's what's important.
I have it. I see it now.
Great.
I can see it now. Buy calendars. Yes, noodles. Yes. Justin, did you see the note that Pam put up earlier in the chat room
Oh, no.
that Chelsea came running through and said hi to Uncle Justin?
Aw,
Yeah,
so sweet.
that's so sweet.
Oh my goodness, I haven't seen her for. She's probably so big now. Oh my goodness.
Probably so big.
The little munchkin I have.
And then there's the other little munchkin
Yeah.
who's now what? I think Pam just said 7
7
months. It's amazing. It's crazy how like when you're living it, it seems like wow, it's just forever. Then it's like from a distance, it's like wow, they're already that old. When did that happen? TWIS calendar.
Yeah. Twist calendar. Twist calendar. Okay.
All right. I'm gonna have to go to bed pretty soon. I have to wake up at like 4:30 in the morning.
Oh gosh, that would be awful. That sounds really rough, Kiki.
I know, doesn't it?
Oh my god. Yeah, Justin, are you how are you liking what my life was when I was in Israel?
So yeah, it's a little bit like becoming a narcoleptic. Because I
Oh,
don't
goodness.
think that I have jet lag coming this way. And then 2:00 in the afternoon, mid talking to somebody, yeah. So anyway, I'm just gonna fall asleep right here, right now. Okay, how's that gonna? Just yeah, keep everybody talking. It's pretty strange. It's actually, I think it was wasn't so bad going the other way. Although, right up until showtime, because our show normally starts 8:00 Pacific Standard Time, and it was as if I had stayed up all through a night, and it was now early into the next morning, and everything was fine until like the half hour or so right before showtime. I got hit by a wall of exhaustion, and I think I told you, like, everything's ready. I'm not gonna make it.
I can't do it.
And I did. I made it. It was fine. But yeah, that was the most. That was the most tired I think I've ever done an episode of TWIS.
You made it though.
Even the one where I like fell asleep in the chair
Right.
during the 24-hour TWIS-mageddon.
That wasn't a chair. It was a couch. And
you ended up on the floor, I do believe.
and the floor. I believe there were many beers involved.
Oh yeah,
And
this
you were
was
gonna drink
this was
a
a
beer
bad
an
this was a
hour,
bad
and then
concept show.
You got ahead of your counter.
It was I was gonna do a beer an hour for the 24-hour TWIS-mageddon show, which is already a bad idea. Kids, don't try this at home. And then I think you're right. I think I got ahead of myself.
Yeah, early on in the night, you were like, "Well, I'm drinking next hour's beer now. It's fine. I'll just drink less later."
I was trying to make it easy for later in the evening, Justin. But yeah, that's not how that works. That's not how that works, people.
Draw a dinosaur day.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I know I added a bunch of new events this year.
Yay! New events in the calendar. That's exciting. That's exciting. It looks good. I will look this over and get back to you about it for sure.
Yeah, and let me know if you like the species, common name, and genus species on there, or
I do.
because I can ditch them too. But.
No, I like it. I think it's nice to be able to see what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Do you like them? I like them.
I think I like it because then people know what they're looking at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Great.
Say goodnight, Blair.
Are we doing TWIS? Are we doing TWIS-mageddon this year? No, not this year.
Say goodnight, Justin.
I can't.
Good morning.
Good morning, Justin.
Good morning,
Good morning, Justin.
Okay.
Good night, Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for another wonderful episode. We will see you next week. We'll be back. I hope everyone has a wonderful science-y week. And I don't think there's anything I have to tell you other than buy a calendar. Buy one of our calendars. TWIS.org. We'll see you next week. Bye. So many buttons. So much.